Okay, so first of all, thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much for helping me putting together this amazing panel, for introducing me some of these amazing people. Guy, Kiva, and Susie, welcome to the London Developers Conference. You must be chased by lots of developers wanting to succeed in this sector, in this industry. But I guess that things are different in 2023 than it were many years ago. So we would like you to update us a little bit about the state of game publishing today. What is the reality when you're a developer and you're facing the markets, especially in PC and console, and you are experts on this. So please help us out a little bit.
Of course, yes. Good, and mic's working. Can you hear us? Sounds like it is, good. Yeah. Got this pillar in front of me, I'm going to
shift back.
Maybe. Yeah, go on then. Yeah, there we go, that's better, isn't it? Make sure people can see me. Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, we're going to be talking about publisher things, and everybody on this panel is hopefully going to be very useful in that regard. My name is Mike Rose. I founded a publishing label called No More Robots. You may have seen me tweeting. I do a lot of that. Yeah, let's go through everybody before we begin. Who's this guy?
I'm Guy. I'm actually the only one here that's not a publisher, so I'm here representing ID at Xbox. So yeah, my role is Director of ID at Xbox, working with independent creators, digital publishers all around the world to help them bring their games to Xbox and try and find success in our ecosystem. So slightly different to the rest of the panel here. Like, our role working with creators is more on the platform support side, trying to find ways that we can make it easier to bring that content to Xbox. We work very closely on initiatives that we have at Xbox, like Xbox Game Pass, as well as a bunch of other things we'll talk about as well.
Yep. Who are you?
I'm Kiva. I'm the publishing producer at Chucklefish. My role very much involves working directly with developers. So when it comes from us signing a game and all the risk assessment associated with that, and then just their whole journey through publishing with Chucklefish, so whether they have any production support that they require or release management or anything like localization and QA, I'll help them out with all of that.
Yeah, and I'm Susie. I am from Raw Fury. I'm the CMO there. I oversee all of the marketing, including all of the disciplines from PR, brand to trailer making, and I oversee all of the campaigns that we do for the games that we publish.
Yes. So yeah, we're gonna try to have a very useful chat for you all. We'll do questions at the end. We'll see how much we natter on for, but hopefully we'll leave some time at the end so you can grill us a bit. So I guess really the way we wanted to start talking was about the state of video games industry at the moment, realistically sort of the PC and console stuff, because I think that's what we all know. What the state of that is right now, what it means for us, what it means for devs as well, and ways that we should be sort of trying to help devs out. I think it's fair to say there's different ways that all of us as publishers, the three of us, have kind of handled the last couple of years differently as, shall we say, sales have started to plateau somewhat. Susie, you talk about it first. How has, in the last couple of years since the pandemic, how has Raw Fury started to kind of try and tackle this a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, Raw Fury's portfolio is, a combination of art games that we truly believe in, that we want to give a chance that wouldn't necessarily be an easy yes for other publishers because of, they're quite small and they're art driven. But then we also do kind of bigger, more commercial games that still have that art element that we believe in. But then over the pandemic, before the pandemic started, we were doing lots of in-person meetings with the developers, brainstorming sessions, taking them away for a few days, really kind of getting into the nitty-gritty so that you can build out not only the production side of things, but also the marketing side of things, because for us, the marketing starts at signing. We try and get in there from the very beginning, because building out the marketing so that it shows off the true core of the game and how the developer wants it to come across to us is incredibly important, and it's contingent to like everything that we do. But since the pandemic happened, we moved to more remote, so we're doing more kind of meetings with the developer just, via video call and stuff like that, and that changes it up differently. So we've had to change the strategy for how we're working, and still trying to be as close and having that really close relationship to take you all the way through from development to launch and beyond. And then also making sure, more importantly, that there is a runway for devs, that after launch, it's not just the end, good luck with you.
Yeah.
Because it's super
it's
important.
definitely starting to become more of a thing you have to think a lot more about at the moment, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so on our side, we've definitely, in the last couple of years, during the pandemic, our sales got really nice. It's horrible to say, right? It's kind of horrible to say out loud. Pandemic was a horrible time, but also, I think for a lot of publishers, like everyone stayed inside, sales started going up because no one had anything better to do. And then in the last year, as the pandemic's waned off, and then also with cost of living crisis, it turns out people can't afford so many video games anymore. On our side, I think we've been quite different at No More Robots in that we've started to kind of bottle up a little bit. I've seen other publishers go larger. They've done bigger funding, they've done bigger things. We've gone the opposite direction. We've gone smaller budgets. We've tried to go back to our roots a little bit more and sign smaller thing. I think for Chucklefish, it's kind of been in between, right?
Yeah, Chucklefish started as a developer first, and then its publishing side kind of evolved from meeting other devs that maybe didn't have the same resources Chucklefish did from the games it was making, and then just offering kind of the marketing services and the marketing know-how that we had at the time. So Chucklefish's business model as a publisher has been quite selective previously, and since the pandemic, I think we're smaller than I think people think we are. The publishing team is only 5 people. But also as the publishing team has grown over the last 8 years or so, we started to see the potential of that publishing team as well. And we're actually kind of going from the angle of maybe we could sign more games now.
Yeah.
So for example, we've always just signed games, and whenever they're ready, they're ready. We don't really have a release calendar that we work towards. So last year we only released the Xbox port of Eastward, but this year we've got a few things coming up. But I think now we kind of want a more regular kind of release pattern for our games, as we've seen that the market's become more competitive, and we want to be a bigger part of that market.
Yeah. What about with Xbox? I mean, you're not a publisher. But,
so ID at Xbox turns 10 this year, so a 10-year anniversary. In that time, we've now grown to have over 5,000 creators as part of the ID at Xbox program, which is awesome, shipping 3,000 games into the Xbox ecosystem. So we're a truly global program that's working with developers all around the world, and the program has continued to evolve throughout the pandemic in terms of some of the new initiatives that we've got, as well as supporting Xbox as we've grown to have PC storefront, new generations of consoles, all that kind of stuff as well. But really, our goal working with creators is to empower them to make the games they want to make and make sure that they can find an audience on our platform. So we do things like every studio that signs up gets 2 free development kits with us. We give all studios access to all of our developer information, our SDK, the same access that any developer worldwide, no matter what size or how they engage with Xbox, would be able to get. And yeah, that's where we kind of fit into it and how we work with developers globally.
Yeah. Let's stick with Xbox for a moment. So, in terms of publishers, well, not just publishers, but developers as well, I guess, trying to work out ways to make their way through this trying time at the moment. Obviously, it would be impossible to not talk about Game Pass's impact and all of that. Are we signing things for Game Pass? Are we signing games as publishers now, thinking this is a Game Pass game? Is that something that's happening?
From the Raw Fury side, we never sign a game that is specifically for Game Pass. We sign a game based on the fact that it's great and that we feel like we must need to play it, and platforms come secondary to that. And then once we get the devs on board and we talk to them and we explore the roots of what we want to do, and if we think it is good for Game Pass, then we'll submit. But it's a sweet extra, or it's something that can help I don't know, help take away some of the risk. And then for the small developers, for when we're doing our small art games, it can be life-changing for them. So it can be really fantastic. But we never sign something just specifically for Game Pass because, I mean, that would be a huge risk anyway. What if they say no?
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, it's true, of course. Yeah. Yeah, I think, on our side, again, obviously, if anybody follows me anywhere, they know that I like Game Pass. I think what I was saying earlier about us being like a smaller, us kind of doing smaller, it means that something like Game Pass is just so much more viable for us. It's kind of incredible for the size. When you're talking about the small art games that you're doing, that's like most of our portfolio. We're doing the smaller games, so because of that, the sort of boon of it is I imagine it's like in between for Chucklefish.
Yeah, we're quite opportunistic. Like if we see something that has that potential, we'll like create pitches and send them over to Game Pass.
Yeah.
We see it as a mitigation tool, really. Like if we can either get some like of our sales targets through like Game Pass day zero, or even just cover the development cost day zero, that like only benefits the developers and creates like so much of a relief. Like day zero, you don't have to like worry about like, are we going to like cover our costs in the first like however many months of this game releasing. So when we can get stuff in Game Pass, it's like definitely a big win for us. But like in the last couple of year now, it's become a bit more competitive to get onto Game Pass. So.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm going to say it's great to hear you like talk about Game Pass as an option that you consider, because for us it's all about player choice and making sure that you as publishers or developers that are self-publishing like understand that choice that they have for how they want to bring games to find an audience as well. Like our ecosystem supports free-to-play games, premium games, subscriptions, just another way that players can engage with content in our ecosystem. So.
What are things that, I guess, as publishers, I guess not just us, but other publishers as well, what are things that we should be thinking about when developers are coming to us that are sort of outside of the deal? There's a contract signed, they make the game, it's done, hey, the game's out. For me, what always has been coming up way more recently, again, because of everything that's just happening, is like the afterwards. I feel like it's just never, ever talked about, and there's so many devs we work with where I start to realize towards the end that they haven't thought about the afterwards. The whole, we've given you all the money for it now, if the game does well or not, what happens for you? Because you've got to plan for both ways, right? And I think that's something that started to come up for me a lot more when we're signing games now, trying to think of the afterwards for them, because a lot of the time they never do. I don't know, is that something that comes up with you guys?
Yeah, it is for sure. Like for me, like when I'm looking at this and often when I'm talking to devs, even at the very beginning, launch is never the end. There's this big misconception. You launch and it's like, all right, cool, we're done, the end. It's just going to magically make money by itself. But like, especially for the first year or two, you're constantly making, or you should be making, your best first impression to everyone, because you are constantly going to be running into people, no matter how big the product is, of people never hearing of that game before. And so you have to make that impression. You have to keep it going. Keep your Steam page alive if that's going to be on Steam. Think about doing, streams or having just B-roll running on your Steam page so the algorithm constantly puts it up. So when you do your first sale, it makes a bigger impact. And then when you're going through and just planning out the journey ahead, you have to think the year ahead at least, because you have to have a plan for how you're going to keep that going, because the launch is actually just the beginning.
Yeah, we really emphasize working with partners to think about, to be planning for the launch ahead of launch, like what post-launch looks like. Like, there's definitely people that we work with that the game's launched, then they start putting that plan in place, and that can work. Like, we've seen the success of games that are 4 or 5 years old that are continuing to grow. But really, if you can put that plan in place for day one, when you've got that big audience as well, like that's definitely a best practice. So thinking about things like when your first sales are going to happen and making sure you're proactive planning those in. When if you're going to be launching like paid DLC or free DLC, what that looks like, because whether you're publishing on Steam or working with a console platform, there's ways that those partners can help you like build your community, and having that planned in advance is definitely something we recommend.
Yeah, I'm always thinking now when we're signing games, a lot of the time, one of the biggest things in a publisher contract, right, is the money. You know, a lot of the time that's like the big thing. And whenever you see these breakdowns, it's wild to me, like how completely different a lot of the time they are. You know, someone pitches to us and they're asking for like crazy amounts more than I can tell they actually need. But then there's the other side where people are asking for so little, and it's like they somehow think they're going to then scrape through. And those ones are always like the more worrying to me, because those are the ones where I'm like, you obviously like don't have a plan for what it, because obviously a game comes out, the day a game comes out, it's not making you money immediately. You know, the platforms are paying out, you know, 1 to 2 months afterwards, sometimes 3 months afterwards. You're not going to be making money immediately. What happens then? You get blank faces sometimes. So it's definitely something we've started to work into what we do.
Yeah, we're always asking them like, well, like in production, you're always like trying to think like big picture. So, and usually like we'll try like 6 months before launch, start being like, so what is the plan after this? Or have you started working on post-content updates or even like game number 2, like if it's their first game. And they never want to think about it. They're on like the home stretch to finishing the game, but it really is like, do they really have all their eggs in one basket, and how can you like as a publisher like try and steer them towards like, because also like a publisher is not a silver bullet. I think we frequently see like publishers like release games that just flop or you've never heard of, and I think a lot of developers just think, if I have a publisher, it's going to be fine, I'm going to like make this money back and like I'll profit no matter what, I'll be able to profit and start making game number 2 then. And that is not always the case, and I think you need to be thinking about like you know, maybe 6 months before launch, starting to think about the pitch for game number 2, or start to think about the post-launch content, really.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like planning for success, or waiting to see if you're successful to then start that post-launch plan.
Exactly.
I think that
exactly
can be, you can just miss massive opportunities.
Yeah. And don't blow all your marketing budget at launch. Like you need to save some of that for, you know, first sale and beyond, because it does make a huge difference. Because I've seen occasions where it's happened a lot of times where people spend all of their marketing money on launch day, you know, for, you know, you've got influencers, paid ads going live, and then suddenly it takes off. And then there's this misconception that it's going to keep taking off. But unless you keep feeding that beast, it isn't. And so you need to have like something that you're going to funnel into it beyond to, even if you're super successful, you still have to have that going in. And then if for some reason your launch didn't go so well, you need that money to kind of give it that lift when you do the first sale, because you've got something that's actually marketable there to kind of give it that extra push. And it can almost act like a, you know, a secondary launch. You never get another launch, but you do get opportunities to boost, and that can make a huge difference. But not if you've run out of money, basically.
Yeah, on that topic actually of sort of marketing spend, if you want to call it, it's always an interesting conversation to me, because, you know, when I started No More Robots, my whole chat was that like we barely spend anything on marketing. That was my whole thing. I was shouting that from the rooftops, and that went great for me for like a few years. You know, for a few years, it was like, I think some people were coming to me like they couldn't believe at times like some of the the size of some of the stuff we were doing off of just shouting a lot on the internet. And what I have felt in the last couple of years is that doesn't work as well anymore. We can still shout, we can still do a bunch of shouting, and it's fine, but I'm certainly now starting to feel a lot more like, oh, I gotta actually spend some money now. I can't, my voice isn't loud enough anymore to just scream. I guess because there's part of it, there's so many games now. Part of it is that, as I was saying earlier, people are less willing to spend money on games right now. Also, I guess people are buying a lot more games that they like see their favorite influencer play. So we're definitely starting to. I mean, obviously, you guys. I think both of you do marketing spend a lot more than I do.
Yeah.
Are you finding you're having to do that more?
Well, I mean, it depends on the type of game it is and the type of audience, because you know, like you said, like one of the reasons that you're finding now is because it is quite oversaturated. There's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
But also, you can do a lot with not very much if you choose the right months and things to do it with.
Yeah.
Like I would never, because I do a lot of pro bono, like indie advice on the side, and I always advise like indie people, if they want to do paid media, for instance, forget November and December, like right off, because you're going to be bidding against people who are putting literal like millions of dollars down into the ad spend, and you can spend all of your money in like a day and never be seen. But you can also spend like $1,000 in a 3-week period and get, you know, 10,000 wish lists if you do it like nicely.
Yeah.
And you do right keywords and things like that. So you don't have to spend absolute tons, but you do have to spend it carefully, and you do have to do your research.
Yes, 100%.
It makes
I
a
feel
huge
like a lot of the
difference.
time what's happening is it's like you're seeing, I'm not saying it's one of us doing that, but I feel like you're seeing some companies who you see spending lots of money, you know, ludicrous amounts of money, and the games are coming out and they look like they're doing very well, and they are doing very well, but also there's so much marketing money behind them.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
And who does that cost fall on? Like, is
That's
that all
exactly it.
recouped for the devs?
Yes.
For the devs. So yeah, it's risk. I think it is really risky to spend a lot of money on marketing, because you know you might not see it back, and if you've signed with a publisher that has really high recoup models, that could be that you just never profit on your game.
Yes.
Yeah, I think from my side of hearing you say like research, I also think about like researching the opportunities that all the different platforms out there provide for developers and publishers, and how that can play into your marketing plans as well. Like our role is always to amplify the work of the creators that we're working with. We don't come in and we don't build your marketing plans and campaigns and assets, but we provide you with information and best practices as to the best timings to do stuff on Xbox, the different opportunities and mechanics that we have available. And if you can build that into your plan, and you're doing, you know, having that same conversation with Steam and PlayStation and Nintendo, then it can all come together, and actually you can probably achieve a lot more for your budget than you'll be able to do if you're going like a classic traditional paid campaign.
100%. I think you know the other side to all of this is what we're kind of all alluding to, is there are very easy ways to just, you know, spaff a lot of money into marketing that does nothing.
Yeah.
You know, where, especially I think you see some devs and publishers doing it towards a launch, where they're like, oh God, oh no, we've not got big enough, maybe the game won't sell, so they just put loads of money in, and it doesn't really do anything, because it wasn't, like you say, it wasn't directed in clever ways.
It's a double-edged sword as well, though, because if you're a developer and you signed with a publisher, you really want to see visible action taken on that publishing contract. So like you'll find that you might like spend a lot on events, or like pay to get on whatever like showcase that you can get onto, just because it's what the developers maybe expect of you.
Yes.
And then it's very hard to prove what, like, if the game would have been just as successful without that sometimes.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it also comes down to whether you're going for like a more traditional marketing campaign, or whether you're going for more like open development, community building, you're doing early access, getting influencers in, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
No, it's a really interesting point, because like if you're a developer with a publisher, it is kind of true, right, that you part of the reason why you've got a publisher is because you're saying, I don't know how to do all of this stuff, or I just don't want to do it. And then if you see your publisher not doing things, you're thinking, well, what are they doing? So then maybe there are moments when there's pressure to just spend some money on a thing just to show you're doing something. It's a bit of a spiral.
Yeah, so how we do it at Raw Fury, we actually have the marketing spend is on a scale, and this is something that we agree with the developer right at the beginning before they sign. So you have the minimum spend, which is like, this will be spent. And it will be planned out from the marketing campaign, you know, like everything is like laid out, whether it's going to go on influencers or trailers or whatever. And then you have the maximum spend, so you can basically go nuts. If something is starting to take off and you want to feed the beast, and it makes sense to feed the beast, then you can. But that is all agreed, and at every single gate we sign that off with the developers, so that they know and they have that visible, the visibility and the trust that we're making these decisions that they're comfortable with. Because sometimes, you can do a really small budgeted campaign, and sometimes, you know, you can do a costly one depending on the type of game and the audience and who it's for, and you need to put more money into it. Because it makes sense, like maybe a trip to Japan, because that's going on the marketing budget, is in the mix because suddenly the Japanese, you know, are going wild and want it in stores and want to see you at Bit Summit. That all comes out of that, because the marketing budget also doesn't just traditionally take care of ads, influencers and stuff like that. It takes care of events and whether you should go to an event or not, and so on.
Yeah, let's talk about events. Good segue. Events. Are they worth it? You know, it's again, we were just talking about publishers doing things to show their partners they're doing things. We stopped doing events a while ago. 2019, actually, was the last time the No More Robots did. We did PAX in 2019. Obviously, there was the pandemic, so couldn't have done one anyway, but we had planned to not do any. We're thinking of doing some again soon, but probably nothing major. I think realistically, the reason for us is because from my perspective, I think a lot of people feel like they have to do events, and it's going to get them loads of eyeballs and Steam wish lists and all of the lovely numbers you're meant to get. And then actually, the things that seem to now push the envelope in those kind of things are like digital events. You know, specifically on Steam, if I want to do like, there's a Steam front page thing on, I can get 15,000 wish lists for a game by doing one of those things and spend, I don't know, a grand with whoever it was that's doing that event. Or I can spend 20 grand going to a show in America. So yeah, we're still for us figuring out whether it's even worth it. Very interested to know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I did a recent analysis on this because I was looking at, you know, Raw Fury have traditionally been at like every event that we can just get to. Like, let's just be there, let's show up. And then I was like, but why though? Like, is it actually doing anything?
Yeah.
I mean, events are fantastic for awareness, especially for your brand. And, you know, it's great for putting you in contact with different platforms, people going around, maybe some influencers visiting your booth. But you're only reaching, traditionally, the people at that event. And, you know, so you have to summarize whether the cost, because events are expensive, and they're even more expensive now than they were before, since the pandemic. And,
well, it's the time you're losing as well, isn't it? You know, if a team goes over there, they're missing what?
No one is developing a game whilst
exactly,
they're there.
Yeah,
like,
the game,
that's just not happening.
We're putting the game, and also you make builds for the show. You know, so you'll spend a few weeks making a show build, and
You have to do that for Next Fest as well.
Yeah.
well, of course, yeah, that's true, yeah. But yeah, it's a whole thing, right? Like, it's not a small thing to do a show.
And it's not an easy, you know, the reason why you get wish lists from digital events is because the barrier is not there. You just literally do the thing and you're watching it and you're like, oh, wish list now, do it. If you're at an event, you're all sweaty, you're wandering around. If you're at Gamescom, it's like a wall of zombies coming at you. And you're not going to whip out your phone and go, I'm just going to search for this on Steam and just like wish list this right now. What you do is, I'll try and remember that, and then you see 1,000 other games, and maybe you wish list a couple of them. So
try and give them a QR code.
Yeah, you try and give it, you're like, here's this, and then they're like, I'll add this to my 50 tote bags that I've got already.
Let me scan all these QR codes.
But I mean, and the cost is significant, and you know, what we came down to the decision of is to have 2 core events, because, and looking at it from the sense of, you know, what event can we go to that's going to give really good press access and get coverage, because that's super important. And then the wish list may organically come from there, but we want to get the news out. And, you know, the best way to do that is by going to an event like GDC and having a build that hasn't been playable before, so you've got something exclusive that's really kind of meaty for press to want to get into. And then the other event that we identified is, if you're in Europe, then Gamescom is the one, because you've got the business areas, you've got press hands-on. A lot of games, September is a nice sweet spot for releasing, so it naturally goes from Gamescom. There's a lot of partners that go there, there's a lot of influencers that go there. And then being like in the indie arena booth, or having your own booth at Gamescom if you can afford it, is really great, because then you've got the consumer feedback, and then you can actually give them a QR code, hope for the best, and then it's all in God's hands. But I did a comparison between like digital showcases as well as events. So like, for instance, we had one game show at Wholesome Games, like, which is a small showcase that's just growing now. I think it's in like second or third year.
Yeah.
And we got 10,000 wish lists, basically for free, for just submitting a trailer that we were saving for, whatever summer event we wanted. And then in comparison, having a game at a different event, we got maybe like 50 wish lists. It was, it was a reality check, because if you're spending like $100,000 across like tons of events for like taking them to it's just not worth it. Like,
there are like, I will say there are benefits outside of what we're talking about, right? So, for us, like, for example, we've gone to events in America, and, we'll, in the evening, like, I'll go to dinner with Xbox or something, and I'll meet some really useful people who are then, months, years later, or, we've had people just come up to it, they've seen our booth, they've seen, look at how many players are playing this game, and we've made deals from someone coming to the booth. So I guess there are benefits in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I was gonna say like two things. I think from our side, like ID Xbox being part of the Xbox platform, like, we want to make sure that we're accessible to creators, so you shouldn't have to feel that you need to go to PAX and pay to have however much that booth costs to be able to speak to somebody from Xbox. So, like, we've been introducing things like having a form so developers can pitch games to us for funding and for Game Pass and that kind of stuff, and also providing best practices like for how to pitch games to us remotely, which is something we've had to do during the pandemic, having not been at events, having to rely on like video conferencing calls for developers to pitch games, and there's pros and cons to that, so we've been trying to provide some advice there. When it comes to events for us, like, we've been experimenting with a lot of different things. So we've just come back from GDC last week, where we had 8 developers with us from all around the world, and we had them at our loft, which is just close to the GDC venue, and about 100 media came in to play their games, and they go away and write articles, and they did interviews when they were there. And that's something that we feel at like a global media level as a platform that we can provide to developers, and it's super rewarding to see their games get amplified like that.
Yeah.
And then we've also been doing that on a more like regional level, so doing like virtual, like EMEA focused events for EMEA press with EMEA games. We've experimented with Twitch gaming, doing like an Idea Xbox like showcase there where we announce games, and that's something that's been really impactful as well. So we've just been experimenting with different things to see what works and like the role that we have as a platform in those challenges.
Yeah, you just went to PAX, didn't you?
Yeah,
and
just
you're
went to
kind of trying
PAX.
to you're sussing out how
like,
worth these things are.
Chucklefish definitely always considered ourselves like more indie than on par with like some of the bigger publishers, but that is kind of changing a little bit. And we went to PAX this year for the first time, and it has been like eye-opening for us because we've never really done an event in the States where we've done like the whole booth and everything. And I think like it's something that we're always under review because we're in the same boat where we're like, are physical events really worth it? Like, can we deliver the same kind of thing like with wish lists and stuff on like just on digital events?
Yeah.
But we've only just been, so we still need to do kind of like a post-mortem on PAX. But something that we like identified with it was that you can like mitigate some of those costs a bit better. Lots of people sell merch on their stands, which you can't really do at other events. Like it's like America, like the home of capitalism.
Sold one truck of shitty.
And we're also kind of like we're kind of wondering if we go to physical events, would it be best to go all in on America because it has the knock-on effects in the West, and then we partner with partners in Japan and China who bring our games to to events there. So it's a constant discussion with us. We like to stay experimental. We don't really have like a fixed how we do things. It changes from game to game and year to year. So
cool.
Constant discussion.
Well, we've got 6 minutes left, and we had another thing we were going to talk about, but I'm thinking maybe it might be nicer for questions.
Yeah.
6 minutes isn't long, is it? Should we do some questions? Have people got questions? Or yes, we've got. Okay, yeah. Let's do questions then. Let's do some questions.
Hi, thank you for the talk. It's very nice to see for like every level of the development process in the panel. So I'm a couple of months off of sending out my first pitches to publishers, and I have a concept where I am right now kind of pitching as a indie game, kind of like 100,000 to 100,000, but it can be scaled up immensely. It can go up to like, it can be AA, AAA, probably not triple, but AA game. So in the application and the pitch, is that scalability something that you would like to see, or is there a good way to kind of show you that, or
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, isn't it?
I can go
Does
for
anybody
that
want
one.
to feel this?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So it's worth looking at the publishers specifically. I think a lot of publishers would try go for the lower budget if they could. So if you are going to publish, or if you're going to pitch to a publisher and you know that maybe their range can be a bit higher, I wouldn't even show them the low range. But if you're, say, pitching to everyone, you should consider what publishers consider themselves more indie and will have indie budgets, and just start low and explain to them like how the scale would change, like what would exist in the game and the marketability of the game, because they might be more willing to take on that risk.
Yeah, I think I kind of echo that. I would say, present the game that you're most passionate about, the version of the game that you're most passionate about and you think is most special. If that is the biggest budget one, then dream big, go big. Like, that's definitely what I would recommend.
I would say, like, from my perspective, though, I guess I would say that one easy way to do this, right, is to kind of check the recent back catalogue of a publisher. So, for example, if you were going to be coming to us, you'd maybe check our games, and you could tell from videos and screenshots pretty quickly, right, whether games were expensive or not. A lot of the time it's quite easy to do that. So it might be that you check like the last 6 games from a publisher, you think, okay, they look sort of, they're AA-ish, they're probably going to take that kind of budget. Or you might look at a publisher, like I think if you looked at some of our games, you'd be like, those look indie as hell. So then maybe you'd come to me with a smaller budget because you'd think he might be more likely to take that one. So yeah, maybe that kind of research might be worth doing as well. Yeah.
So you spoke a bit about the afterwards that people forget to do.
Yes.
Could you perhaps give a few examples of like the common mistakes you see people failing to do in particular, maybe aside from marketing, or is it just?
Yeah, I'll tell you I kind of mentioned it, but a really simple one is whether the game's going to do well or not. So let's say the game comes out in March. Okay, game comes out in March, and a lot of the time developers will be like, right, so the funding will stop here, but then we'll start to get game sales in these months, and so that will be great. But the problem is that a lot of the time, you funded the game, and so a lot of the time, there's going to be recoup happening there. Whether that's the dreaded 100% or whether you're getting a small percentage. Even if your game does really well, it's likely there's still going to be a period when it's recouping, right, where you're not seeing as much money. But also, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the money's not coming in for a while anyway. It takes time for it to come from the various platforms. And then, the publisher's going to then have to make, and then you're going to have to set, it's going to take at least, a few months before you're seeing anything a lot of the time. And the most common thing I see is just during those months, me having to go to someone we're working with and say, do you need me to like fund the next couple of months for you? Because none of us had thought about that previously. So that's something we've started to work into our contracts a bit more, I think, recently.
Yeah, we're working that in as well. Really having a good development plan from launch onwards, when you're going to do, if you're going to do DLC, when you're going to do your first DLC, or when you're going to do your first update, making sure that there is, a proper plan there that you can kind of keep the community excited about, because community is very important on your, when you've got through launch. Like, I'm not going to lean hard on the marketing stuff because that's, we already talked about that, but it really is important that you're transparent as well of what's coming so you can keep people invested. and really show the players that, you know, what you're doing, because then they will trust you and then they will actually go on that journey with you. Otherwise, you find sometimes community will just, if they get a little hint that nothing's coming, then they just drop you. And it's not even that they're expecting DLC, but they are expecting communication.
It's unbelievable sometimes, isn't it? Like how much, I know, you say it out loud and it sounds obvious, but it's unbelievable sometimes how much just a little bit of supporting a game post-launch can keep those sales going. You know, we've had games where the launch has been fine, but then the dev has just continued to support the game, and lo and behold, the sales are staying at a level where it's continuing to support the dev and they're happy.
If you show loyalty to your game and the players, it comes back, you know, threefold. Like, people love that.
Your community just start marketing for you.
Yeah,
like, they'll
exactly.
just be your best advocates.
Yeah.
So.
We've definitely seen situations where a game's come out and, you know, it was a finished game. You know, fair enough, it was a story-based linear game. It came out and it sold. But then because of that, there wasn't really so much that could be done post-launch because it was a finished product. And so those graphs look a lot more like up there and then a lot more of a dip than, you know, compared to the games where we can more naturally support them afterwards. Big difference. Can we do one more? Can we do one more question? Are we allowed?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Good talk, folks. Thank you. Given pricing's always been quite a contentious thing in games, and how you price things or whatever, and there's always been this sort of psychological barrier for consumers with like the AAA games. There's a figure you don't go past. Given the sort of the shit that we're all in.
It's a good way to put it.
Is it become, like, how much is that weighing on your consciousness when you are pricing games, or are you considering that, and how, like, I don't know, are you measuring it somehow? How are you making decisions around this?
That's a good question. It's a good question.
We really struggle with this because we are, you know, widely considered the pixel art publisher. And for some reason, no matter how expensive the game was to make, like, players really have a thing about a retro-looking game should be cheap. And we really, really struggle to get past that. And we've just found that we have maybe had to keep our prices a bit lower than we want to. Really, really recently, though, because of like cost of living changes and inflation, we've actually done a review of all our prices and changed them. And it's the first time that we've done anything like that before. And it was just something that just made sense. We had to bring even games that are already released, like, kind of on par with the rest of the market.
Is that changing the base price, or is that changing for currency conversion?
A lot of it was currency conversion.
Yeah.
There were some base price changes, but a lot of it was going through different markets and changing the prices because of that.
It's coming up for us. So we've got a game coming up, and 3 years ago I would have been saying to the devs, let's do $25 for it. I think we can push for $25. And at this point, I'm looking at it and thinking, this might be $35. And the thing about that is that it's this hard balance, right? Because if we go $35, what I'm essentially saying with that is we're aiming to sell less copies up front, but the higher price gives us future wiggle room. Because then half price, when we finally go half price on a $35 game, it's basically the same price as one of the games we've got out now currently at full price. It's a hard one.
It's a really difficult balance, because you can also go the other way and go, I'm going to make this super cheap.
Yeah.
But then you run the risk of devaluing your game, actually. Yes. And then when you do go down to when it hits into sales, you're like, after like the first year, you're like, oh, now the game's $1.99, and like literally no one is making any money. And it's so difficult because you have to factor in like dev costs and the value of the game, and you know, the type of game it is, the audience it's for. So we do a lot of research that goes into that. And we also do a lot of like regional research to see how much we should price it in different regions, because, you know, worldwide pricing is a minefield.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it's a really nuanced question, and I feel like, kind of like you're saying, we want to make sure from our side that creators are putting the price on content that they feel is fair for like the value of the content and the quality that you're creating?
Because players right now, right, obviously it's always been a thing, but right now especially, this whole like, you know, price versus number of hours. Like, how many games have we seen recently come out where they're like 4 to 5 hours long and they're like $20, $25? And especially on Steam, you see the reviews where it's like, thumbs down, completed this in 4 hours. But was really good, but not for this price. And it's like,
Then you see something like Vampire Survivors, low price point.
Yes.
People are pumping hundreds of hours into that, right? And it kind of goes against all of the...
Yeah, I know, it makes no sense, But but then, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying about the look then being the thing. So I guess with Vampire Survivors, he was thinking, it looks like this. Like, that's no disrespect to him at all. I play the hell out of that game, but he's thinking to himself, it looks like this, I have to go for a lower price point. Which, I don't know, if he'd gone for a highest price point, would he, you know, have loads more money, or would it not have kicked off in the way that it did?
Yep.
It's the impossible question. I hope that answered your question. You're welcome. Are we done, or can we do more?
I think it's I don't see any more. Yeah.
We've got more.
We have
Perfect.
Last one.
Last one.
I think it's interesting also for them to do some networking with you while we have the coffee.
Of course, of course.
For sure.
Lovely
Just
coffee.
wondering if any of you guys have a particular interest or focus in sort of games for good, or if that's some other publishers that are particularly interested in that kind of thing, or of any kind of ethical basis to the game's purpose.
Yeah, I can go first. So actually last week at GDC, we announced our Developer Acceleration Program. This is an initiative that we've been doing behind the scenes for the last couple of years. But really at its core, it's about finding ways to provide additional support for creators from underrepresented backgrounds or games that are telling stories, or the actual game content or themes itself represent sort of like challenging topics as well, or topics that aren't as common in games today. And that initiative actually has 3 ways that we're supporting creators. So building a community where we can provide forums for giving like best practice and advice. We do online seminars that we call the Green Room, where we're bringing in experts from different parts of Microsoft, but also bringing that community together so they can learn from each other. We're also looking at ways that we can support developers like sim ship their games, having some like porting initiatives to get that content onto Xbox and make it easier, as well as a prototype funding initiative as well. So something that we announced last week, and yeah, we're happy to talk to anyone about that today as well.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, Raw Fury is really committed to signing underrepresented developers and also looking at games that can make a difference. Like, for instance, one of the reasons we signed Call of the Sea was because it was from a woman-led studio by a woman in her 40s with a lead character who was in her 40s saving the man in her life. It was just
so
like
good.
This whole journey, and it was just wonderful, and it was just so nice to be on that journey with them. And we're constantly looking at how we can elevate not only the developers and their stories, but games that are really going to change the way that people think and bring, art to people who, didn't even know that they needed it. So.
Yeah, for us it's really important. Like, if we're going to reach our goal of, having an ecosystem that can reach like 2 billion people on the planet, that there's games that are more accessible to everyone around the world. So no matter who you are, that you feel like there is content that relates to you and your background on our ecosystem. And it's something that's super important and makes me proud to work for Xbox when we do stuff like this.
Yeah. It's been a super blind spot for me, actually, I would say. I've definitely been thinking more about it recently, but like a lot of the games we've signed in previous years have been from, I mean, to put it bluntly, like a lot of dev teams that all look the same. Do you know what I mean? Like, not good enough at all. There's been a couple we've signed recently for games that we've not announced yet, where I'm feeling a lot better about it. But yeah, it's definitely something that I think I would like to go hard on a bit more, I think.
Yeah, I think we sign very few games, so I think it's not something we've had the opportunity to kind of explore, but we're also very, there's no pitch that we don't want to see. I think, a preconception people have of Chucklefish is that, we sign and publish one kind of game, but our mentality is very much that any pitch has the potential to change what like we see as a Chucklefish game. So I think for like Games for Good, there's stuff like there's a lot of people within the studio and a lot of initiatives within the studio that we kind of do. Like there's a lot of like environmentally conscious stuff, and we also work a lot with War Child on a lot of stuff. So it's definitely like if there's like an interesting game out there doing like with that Games for Good focus, it's like a pitch we'd really want to see.
Cool.
Cool.
We're done.
Okay, so we're done. Thank you very much, the four of you. Thank you. And time for enjoying some coffee and some conversations with the developers.
Indeed.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, everyone.